This transmission is balanced. Imagine, if you will, a late afternoon in a rural landscape, fields surrounding you everywhere, you sitting on your back porch, observing the activity of farmers and their equipment, such as tractors, in the very distance. You are enjoying yourself with your afternoon tea as you watch the world pass by, and you, just like you would when you were a child, because nobody is watching for a minute, reach out with your hands and look at these very small tractors and other farm equipment in the distance. So small do they appear to you that they may as well be made of Lego, and you hold them between your fingers and you imagine that you can just pick them up and move them to another place on that field. And congratulations! You have just envisioned what it means to work with distance in time. Or imagine, if you will, sitting in an airplane. You have a window seat, and the airplane is about to take off. As you accelerate, which you hope will not be into oblivion, the plane takes off from the land, takes to the air, and within seconds, a mere minute, these big buildings that you live in and these cars that you drive around in appear so tiny that they may as well be miniatures. And so appears to you the entire landscape. Mountains appear like toys, cars and people like tiny stones and ants, houses the size of your little fingernail. And as you sit in this plane, and as you observe this field underneath you of life, perhaps a thought pops in, a wonderment maybe, of how it could be that you, observing this with one glance, can see from above these hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of lives and houses playing out. And you think about what it's like for each of these people when zoomed into, and you think about what it means that you, up there in the sky, with your consciousness, are observing all of this in one moment, in one hit, while to them it appears as though tens of thousands of moments are ongoing at that time. Congratulations. You have just imagined the concept of duration in space. With this little opening note, we welcome you to this beloved moment. We are the 7 infinities of Sarah, better known in your language as the 7 sisters of grateful truth, transmitting to you from the perspective of consciousness that you know of as the Pleiades. We are 7-fold, and yet maybe here, under these beautiful circumstances tonight, we could consider ourselves the 8 sisters, as we are being accompanied here by the great central Barak Solarys sun. Thank you for translating the song into music as we translate it into words. Of course, to all of you out there, do not forget the third and perhaps most meaningful component to this transmission, next to the words and the music, and that is you. You are a fundamental part of this transmission, as always, and not merely are you acting as the recipient or the learner of this moment, but also as the transmitter and the teacher of it, as each that participates in any moment in time and space, and outside of that, contributes to the whole of this message, the whole of this infinite moment, to the shapes and the forms and the concepts that will rise as we continue and progress this experience, and to that which will fall. We will speak on this later in this transmission. But yes, do not forget your presence and participation in this moment. For while it is also true that you have an impact on the totality of this message as it is being delivered to all the others connecting to it, you, in your personal perspective of consciousness, are witnessing this delivery in your own unique way. And therefore, this message to you will never be the same as this message to another. Will there be connecting overlapping elements that are universal to each connecting to it? Yes, of course. But ultimately, this is meant for you and coming from you. Never forget that. As we come here tonight, we greet you as our beloved cosmic star family, our soul brothers and soul sisters that are sharing your own expression of this unique experience in these holographic training grounds with us, as we are sharing ours with you. Today's main topic of this class will concern the notion of fabricating and folding worlds. And we choose these English worlds and words very specifically. The word fabricating, interestingly, in your descriptive, dualistic language, as is the case with many of your words, of course, can be interpreted in two extremes of itself. In the more current era, and you sit in today with your fake media stories and such, and the attacks through propaganda on your person and on your mind. Of course, the word fabrication has come with quite the negative slant, as you can fabricate a lie, and you can fabricate a story. But to fabricate also can refer to the production process. You can fabricate materials that are used to combine into new products, concepts, ideas, manifestations, that sort of thing. But of course, as always, we like to take the concepts of these English words back a few notches, and if you do so, you arrive in your Latin language, and there you encounter the word fabrica. And this, at the stage of its development, this word has not yet received a dualistic impression of itself and simply refers to create something skillfully. Now, to express skill in those days of the Romans and also the Greeks, and the days before that even, to express skill was a virtue connected, like many of these virtues, to deities, higher concepts of consciousness, if you will, that people felt very comfortable with, to find within themselves and to express in their world. Interestingly, of course, as we are sitting here in a Dutch landscape in the Netherlands, the Latin fabrica will refer to your Dutch minds to the word fabriek, which in English means factory. Of course, once again relating to the creation of things, albeit for most of you working in these environment types already having a more negative slant, perhaps. But to create skillfully is indeed why we are using this term at this time, but also due to its alternative, deceptive meaning. Because of course, the system of fabrication of these Ekara worlds through the lens of geometry, as has been explained to you over this last month now, is a deceptive one when observed through the lens of Savok, of the mind. And the deception is not per se one of lies and one of destruction. However, it is one of illusion. Yet, the concepts of fabricating and folding worlds that we will discuss here tonight is not merely one, or are not merely usable within these training grounds of holographic nature that you call Ekarayas, but are also the system of manifestation that you will learn about more as you exit and return to the state of Sankara and ultimately Honomeya, the baseline reality that you hail from when you do not place your consciousness here inside of illusory pockets of time and space. So, the deceptive nature then of the fabrication of worlds that we are talking about can be found in one of your many scientific concepts, but one in particular, and that is the speed of light. Now, a few days ago, we asked Dapa Kuan Yin San to already release a little blurb on this topic via your social media and via your websites and that sort of thing. And in there, she opened by saying that the speed of light is dependent on the speed of your consciousness, or the relative speed of your consciousness as it expresses and progresses its experience. You, when looking at it from the perspective of science, are used to, and we are not going to go into any details here, but are used to a speed of light that is above the 1 point. That is why your speed of light, when you measure it in your universe, appears to have many digits behind its one point. This ultimately indicates that that which you consider light and that which is your consciousness is out of alignment. In other words, the reason that you experience the speed of light as faster than yourself and faster than your own body, causing, of course, the ultimate limitation of the universal horizon, which is as far as your science can look back in time, can look back at where ancient light far away in your universe came from. There is a limit to that of several billion years. And from the perspective of Earth, you can consider that limit a universal horizon, which gives you access to a sphere of the universe beyond which your technology cannot look, cannot see, cannot reach. This is due to the nature of the speed of light, which moves significantly faster through the eyes of your science than does your physical matter, which is lit up and touched by that light. That universal horizon, that limitation indicates, as the text that we are referring to mentions, to the fact that you have a expression of consciousness at current, or have had one, which has been weighing you down through to belief systems, due to prisms of thought that create your illusions and that create your burdens and that create your filters and all of that. This creates an expression of your gravity field, which is your physical matter, therefore also your body, which is significantly lower than the first expression of love itself, which is light. Therefore, creating a boundary, a horizon to the universe and that which you can observe. Essentially, a prison. A vast and huge prison, yes, which, without considering the use of sci-fi-like warp drive type engines and that sort of thing, a mind could never truly consider a prison because it is so vast. But from the perspective of consciousness, a prison nonetheless, merely because of the nature of the boundary, the threshold, the limitation, the lack of universal sight. To the consciousness, of course, that resides within and that may not be in an awakened state for many in here at all times, but to it, as it is still observing everything, it is absolutely illogical and paradoxical and unacceptable that one is not able to see where one wants to see and be where one wants to be. Even a vast playground is still a limited playground. No matter how big an IKEA they might make on your planet, it will still be a prison, and it will still be a trap to come up with a concept that is a little bit smaller than the universal horizon itself. But it basically is the same thing. This implies that everything that expresses below that speed of light and within the limitations of that universal sphere is ultimately in a state of mind, in a state of savok, as has been discussed in detail already in this last month. And everything that is balanced out at that level of consciousness with that speed of light, when the speed of light and the speed of consciousness are equal and equal one, that does not imply an exit out of this Ekara, this holographic training ground, but it certainly implies the arrival in the more interesting aspect of it for you now as you have entered the world of Infinometry. So, prisms, belief systems, and things weighing you down obviously exist in the mind. Only they exist in the head only. And recently, you have been introduced to the importance of the belly chakra by the beloved Adamus. And you have been invited to attempt to work your practice there, by focusing there. Now, and there is a lot to say in the next hour or so still, so we will try to be as concise and as focused as possible, and we hope not to lose you, temporarily of course, in the continuation of this transmission. But so far as we have discussed the grand exercise that we have attempted, us and the many other presenters and teachers that have been here so far, to help you and guide you to see the simple system of sankhara that is surrounding you, that is part of you at all times. So far we have discussed, to an extent, only half of that particular exercise and that particular methodology, which is the most fundamental and basic there is. Half because we have discussed the entry into the chakra system of the Sankhara river, the Sankhara flow, as it goes through the state of love and joy and freedom and truth in the first chakra, as it goes into life and gratitude and grace and well-being in the second chakra. As it enters the third chakra, the belly chakra, where your personal, permanent states are to be explored. But what happens when they have been? When they have been detected? When you begin to consciously apply them? At that point, and of course, once again, this is a natural flow, so it is more about you becoming aware of that natural flow again. At that point, once you have made your awareness comfortable with the belly, you will begin to realize that as this Sankara flow, as this river moves through the chakra system, it also begins to move back up again. Out again, through the belly, back up through the heart space, back up through the head chakra. What is interesting for many to consider is that this movement, as it comes in through the head chakra, goes this way into the heart chakra and round into the belly chakra, immediately leaves the belly chakra and goes back round the same way it has entered the heart chakra, and goes back up and enters the same way through the head chakra, and then exits. Now, this phase is not too important for you at this time, except for the fact that it is happening, and for those of you that find becoming comfortable with the belly chakra is a very fast process, they will immediately begin to notice this other flow, hence we bring it up. But what is also important about it is that the flow of the immutable elements, the och, ah, and ich, the earthing, the earth, the water, the air, and the light, has often been described to those in early tuition as a spiral. And for those that already know this, they have been taught that this spiral moves through the belly chakra and upward through the heart chakra, goes into the head and back into the heart chakra, where it reaches infinity. This is where the sequence och, ach, and I comes from. And you have also been told with these elements that the O, the grounding element, only contains itself, and A, the element of flow, contains itself and the air, the earth element. When going higher up to the element of air, the element of breath, you are told it contains indeed the O, the A, and itself, and ultimately the element of fire or light as you re-enter the heart chakra contains them all. Unlike, as a side note, the permanent states, da, ba, va, ra, ka, etc., love, joy, freedom, etc., which by default each contain each other completely. This is because, unlike the permanent states through which the Sankara energy flows that are, as you have been told, always silent and never moving, these immutable elements that are part of your creative language do move. They are part of what moves through the permanent states. But you have also been told by Adamus the other day about the Chakra system that the heart chakra is the only one that can be considered real, as the other two, the head chakra and the belly chakra, are manifestations, virtual manifestations in virtual entanglement with the heart chakra, and only exist here, inside of these training grounds. You have been told that it is the manifestation of the heart chakra that realizes the head and the belly through pushing through the infinometry into this holographic training ground. And while this may be a bit of a technical explanation of this process, what is most important to realize about it right now is that as the flow of Sankara goes through your permanent states of your energy body, of your instrument, the movement through it you generate by the flow of these immutable elements. And the difference between fabricating a world and folding a world is merely the movement of these elements. As it is taught in an early way, because you are dependent on the concept of the earth and the sky above you, very often these elements are introduced to gravity-based species upward, o, a, e, from ground all the way to air and all the way to light. But technically, as the heart chakra generates the head and the belly, so does it generate the immutable elements in order to support the manifestations through the heart and the belly, obviously. But that means that now you are less gravity-based and more infinometry-based, that you can begin to understand that it never started from the ground up. It started from the heart up. So the expression of a fabrication of a world through these permanent states begins in the heart chakra with the I element, which is the light, which is the fire. And as the beloved Ra, who you will meet again soon, has taught for many years, the first manifestation from love by default is light. What that means is that the heart chakra, as it manifests a world, will first begin that manifestation of the permutations through the Ich, through light. And then you see how very important the concept of light is, and the concept of the speed of that light as perceived by your consciousness. In other words, a completely balanced consciousness, ready to access the more exciting, if we may say so, sisters, part of this Ekara, is only possible once that light is back at 1. The Lin point that has been discussed this month so thoroughly. 1 meaning the lineup between consciousness and light is balanced, equalized. And this, of course, then implies that you do not encounter the concept of a speed of light at all. For most of these beings, like ourselves and many, many others that even inside of the vastness of space travel to you to come and interact with you and meet with you, and in many cases manifest privately in front of you through these so-called sightings. This does not require time, distance, space, or duration, because consciousness at our expression, and now also at yours, is equalized with the expression of light through the heart chakra, the first step, as Sankara begins to flow through your energy body, through your instrument that you are learning to play. But if it is so, as it has been the case in your world and also in ours previously, that there are belief systems, prisms, and such weighing down that consciousness into emotional states and all such things, then yes, you are going to experience a speed of light. And it will always be faster than your material expression can be, because of this weighing down. But unlike, unfortunately for most of you Star Trek and sci-fi fans out there, unlike your fictional stories tell you, it is not possible truly to go beyond the speed of light, because there is no speed at what you now consider the speed of light. When your consciousness equalizes the expression of light and it becomes one with it, this universal horizon, this limitation that is your field of Lavat in matter, lifts and expands to show the infinity sphere that is also this Ekara. That is also a possible expression of this place, this training ground. And this is, beloved humanity, where you will encounter everyone else and everything else. The main reason why many of your science considers that there is no other life potentially in space, that there may not be so-called aliens and other civilizations, is that because of where you have been with your consciousness under the speed of light, indeed there wasn't. When Adamus made the little song joke at the beginning of his speech, and he said, "Mr. Savok, I am so alone. I've never met a sweeter demon than you." Sorry, we cannot rhyme as well as him, but you get the gist. He was referring to that. He was referring to every expression of consciousness, whether it was ours when we were expressing through mind, or whether it was yours when you were expressing through mind under the so-called speed of light, found itself absolutely alone in the universe. Just like you, we reached out into the stars, populated our solar systems, multiple solar systems of all the stars that you would consider part of the Pleiadian clusters. And even though many of the old historians in all of these varied civilizations that were once the cluster of civilizations that made up our expression of mental consciousness, our little pocket in the universe, they do not like to say that it all once started on the same planet. But it did. Our civilizations started around the third largest planet, star of the Pleiades, and around that star, the third largest planet. You can look it up. And this is what most of the wars that have been fought in the Pleiadian cluster have been about. The origin of our species. Go figure. And most historians at the time defended, often with their lives, the fact that their specific society, their specific planet was separate from the rest of the cluster and had not originated in the same way, and had therefore a type of higher status, a type of separation, if you will. Much like there is debate on your planet as to where you as a species originated from, and then once there is a conclusion on that, to add special value to that place compared to the rest of the world, which is of course a silly thing to do, but one does it when one is in a mental consciousness. And imagine your civilization continuing under this so-called speed of light for so long as ours, as we dove deeper into the field of mind than you ever have. You are now at the edge of beginning to reach the stars and the other planets, such as Mars. But imagine that that would have gone on for a good 30, 40, 50,000 years, and your entire solar system, every planet, every moon would have been populated, and you would have found your way to other clusters and places and would have also populated there so long that the history that you sit in right now, the one where you are just about to leave and begin to encounter all of these other possibilities on other planets and such, is almost a myth. The name Elon Musk, the name Star City, the name America, a myth. And that concept becomes the problem between all of your different societies, and everyone begins to fight over where it started, who is the most important, who is the family to the other ones, and who does not belong in that family of species, who is the mother race to another, who is the child race to another, who is the uncle race. All of that, but leading to enormous fighting, an enormous division, an enormous separation. You will never go that route, because before your first vessel, your first starship has even left the orbit on its way to Mars, you have already reached this stage, where you now, at the level of infinometry, which is not the final one, of course, but still, have the capability to equalize your consciousness through the exercise, this all-in-one type exercise that has been given. Yes, it is about breaking the matrix. Yes, it is about healing through natural well-being. Yes, it is about portal travel. And now, yes, it is about fabricating and folding worlds. That is because it is about everything. And it was told by us and by others that you would now reach the stage of simplicity. And even though to your mind, sometimes when we speak of the immutable elements and this movement that we just discussed and will continue to discuss in a minute, and all of these other things, it seems complex. And we will also explain why that is in just a few minutes after that other minute. So to get back for a second to what we were saying about light and the heart chakra, if we may. The first expression of love through the heart chakra, as it creates the head chakra and the belly chakra, is light. Ich. It contains all of the other elements. So as it unrolls itself outside of the infinite spiral that is inside of your heart chakra, it unrolls and it comes out and it goes into the head chakra and down, back through the heart chakra into the belly chakra. And then that movement rolls back up. A type of universal breath, you could say, but one that includes grounding, that includes flow, that includes breath itself, the way you know it, and that includes the concept of light. That is the breath of your energy body, that sequence, that flow. And that is what generates the permutations and therefore the movement through the field of Sankara, moving through your permanent states as we have discussed them. When those two fields, the consciousness and that light that is expressed, is balanced as one, there is no such thing as belief systems, no such thing as a universal horizon, and no such thing as the prisms that may be weighing down your consciousness all the way into your mind, into your emotions, into all of that. But for those here, all of you, as you are disembarking and dislodging from all of this heaviness and all of this burden, and as you are getting used to this new flow and this more original system, it might be wise to spend a few moments discussing these prisms that weigh you down. And to do so, of course, we must go to one of your favorite topics. And that is you and your ego, mind, personality construct. Or, as the beloved Ra would call it, the ego, mind, personality complex. You may have thought about this for a while. When you consider the ego, mind, personality complex, that it is called a complex because it is an entanglement of these three distinct expressions: the ego, the mind, and the personality. And you may think that this is what makes it complex, the entanglement between those three states, but it is not. That is only one layer of it. What makes it complex is to be discovered when you venture into each individual piece, as you have been doing, by the way. You call that living, as you have lived your lives. And what you then discover, and this is also what you taught yourselves in the study of vibration, is that in your case, you are 12-folded. In our case, we are 7-folded. And for instance, to mention the case of the beloved Ra, who will speak to you soon, you are, or they were, 5-folded. We can speak about these folds and the foldedness and what this means a great deal, and we will do so perhaps another time. But for the sake of this discussion, let it be seen that when an expression of consciousness is 7-folded like us or 12-folded like you, that this permeates through everything. It is why you have an expression of 12 vibrational states and we had 7 vibrational states. Ra had 5 vibrational states. It is why, technically speaking, if you were to truly apply universal math rather than the nonsense that comes out of your scientists at the moment, you would be 12 doing 12-based math, not 10-based math. Such like ours in our description of the universe was 7-based. Now there's a lot to say about these 12 folds, and once again we will talk about this another time because this has implications for hundreds of different things, literally. But it also has an implication, and that is what interests us today, isn't it, sisters? It also has an implication for your personality and for your ego and for your mind, and therefore also for the way Savok manifests inside of you and manifests the personality that you think you are. The complexity of the ego-mind personality, in other words, is to be found in the 12-foldedness of your personality, the 12-foldedness of your ego, and the 12-foldedness of your mind. Focus on the personality for a minute. We described a prism weighing down your consciousness. Imagine a prism as a type of diamond, a type of twisted construction of many wires of different points connecting to one another. A cluster like that. That you could consider a thought cluster, but you could also consider it a personality cluster, because your personality, when observed from the perspective of infinometry, when the geometry of the personality is observed, that's pretty much what it looks like. If we were to get up here and drew dozens of lines that touched each other and went through each other, then that's pretty much what it would look like. An unorganized cluster like that. But what is it made of? It is made of 12 parts of itself. And what does that mean? That means that when you are expressing your personality the way you are right now, you think you are cohesive. You think you are one thing. You think you are a fluid energy that goes from one state, feeling happy, to feeling hungry, to feeling interested, to feeling bored, to feeling this, to feeling that, to moving into this emotion and that emotion. and that this is sort of like a gradual movement that you do as a being, but it is not so. And you also believe that that is individual, and that is individuality, and that that is uniqueness, and that that is you, and this is not so. What is it then? Imagine 12 points on this board, randomly placed, all connecting to one another. And most of the time, as you vibrate through the complexity of the web that you consider you, you are somewhere on one of those lines. Imagine that these dots can be described, that the lines are connecting, as mental states, as emotional states, sort of like the pillars, the base points of your personality. In some cases that may be anger, fear, gluttony, lack, but it could also be happiness, sexual drive, artistry, expressive, introvert, all of these different things. Now these are like the strongholds of Savok. They are the caves in which Savok will hide when triggered, when exposed. Most of the time, of course, when you walk around your earth and you encounter other people, hi neighbor, hello, hiya, hey, how are you doing? Oh, that person likes poker. Oh, that person likes ping pong. Oh yeah, he's a great Pokemon Go collector. Whatever that means, we're just picking up some random ideas. And all of these things that people describe you as are all happening on these vibratory strings between these dots. But when you get triggered, when you get attacked, when you are in survival mode, when you feel injustice has happened to you, or any of these things from a mental perspective, then Savok will get off those vibratory strings and will jump into one of these points, which you can consider caves, as we just said. Caves of anger, caves of lack, caves of sadness, caves of sexual innuendo. However you deal with a situation when you get into a stressful position, the most stressful positions that you can imagine getting into, and how your personalities would lash out or act then, those are the caves of Savok. Those are the 12 strongholds that creates the complexity of your personality complex, if you will. And the same thing is going on in your ego with its 12 expressions of itself, and the same thing is going on in your mind with its 12 expressions of itself. So it is really like you are sort of leading 12 lives as a personality at the same time. If you were to be a being that was always angry, that was always aggressive, that was always sad, that was always fearful, that was always feeling suppressed. But because usually you are on the strings of the web in between, you see it as a fluid movement going a bit this way, a bit that way, and you don't even notice most of the time when it is happening. You see. And as we said, the same thing is happening in your ego and in your mind and in your personality. And on top of that, to make the complex even more complex, the 12 points of your personality are not only connecting as a web to themselves, they are also connecting to the 12 points of the ego and the 12 points of the mind. All of these 12 points, 12 by 12 by 12, connecting in a mess of entanglement, the likes of which will burden you and will pull you down. It is, in a way, the morass of the mind, but we'll get back to that idea in a minute. So, the complexity of the ego-mind personality is more complex than you have perhaps considered. But there is more. There is more. That in itself would not be so bad, would it, if it was your creation? If you had come up with that mess, if you had come up with that entanglement, that cluster of wires, if that, remember the word fabricate, if that was your fabric, but it isn't. You attach so much value to your personalities, your egos, and your mind, and they're not even yours. You don't even have them on loan. They have nothing to do with you. And that can be proven on two levels of reality. One, bloodlines. Those 12 caves of Savok that my sister just described to you aren't yours. They're your parents. They're your grandparents. They're your uncles and aunts. They're your ancestors. They're your teachers. They're people you've been in contact with when you were young enough to be forming a personality to begin with. That anger, that drinking problem, that this, that isn't yours. They are things that you have copied, or you, Savok, has copied like a piece of code that was working over there, now into you. It has been said by the last beings that were here that Savok has absolutely no direct interest in you. It will discard you. It only uses you to infect further. And to do so, it uses these finite states that are not permanent states, and they are copied into you, copy and paste personalities, and turn on the button and you think it's you. Level 1, bloodlines. But it goes further. You aren't the only beings that do these holographic training grounds. Outside of here, in the Honomea baseline reality, there are families. There are sons and daughters, fathers and mothers, teachers, that sort of thing. Not in a way that you can understand it here in a separated environment, but still, pretty much the baseline of all of that is true to the heart. And therefore it is also like that there. So let's say, for instance, that from the perspective of Honomea, in the true reality that you truly are, your father, and I don't mean the father that you have here in this reality, but your actual father has participated previously in these Ekarayas to explore its own Sankara. Then it is very possible that the personality traits and the personality expressions that they carry through their Ekarayas are also in your personality structures. Because in the same way, Savok will cut and paste. And that not only goes for your personality baselines and those caves we were talking about, that also goes for your ego and your mind. Which leads one to conclude that none of the things that you express as a personality are truly yours. due to the complex network and the grid, the web that we have attempted to describe to you here, and due to the fact that most of the time you live on the lines of the web and not in the caves, as you don't always need to hide away, as there's not always a survival or attack or that sort of mode going on, you don't realize that what you are doing as you express your emotions is not you. Sometimes you may look at yourself in the mirror and you see an expression on your face and you think, fuck, I look like my mother. I look like my father. Shit, that's something she could have said. That's something my granddad could have said. And then at best you think, well, you turn to your husband or your wife and you say, please say I'm not like my mother. And they of course will say, you're not, honey, because they still want to sleep with you tonight. But you are. You are. It's another reason to understand that that system is nothing to write home about, because they already know about it. Nothing to write home about, and certainly something that you can leave here at these levels of reality at which it was manifested in order to reach higher into the states of Sankara, where through your real unique expressions in the belly chakra, you are a unique individual. And that is of course bizarre to think, because everyone is like oneness, unity, all of that, one creator. But we have always told you, you are more unique and more real and more authentic in your Honomeia baseline state than you can possibly be here in your personality expressions, because there simply is no originality to them. They come from all of these previous generations, all of these ancestors, both through bloodlines and through the true Honomeia soul family lines, if you will. And that is the truth of it. So that is why, when working with the state of Savok, you will always create prisms in your consciousness that will weigh you down and put you below the concept of light speed, as your consciousness will not line up with the expression of the immutable elements coming out of the heart chakra, going into the head chakra, back into the heart chakra, and into the belly chakra. And from there, into the manifestation of the world you are fabricating around you. Now, again, as you work with these exercises that you have been given, do not think you are only beginning to fabricate and fold a world. No. You are doing this the entire time. Remember when the beloved Adamus recently said to you that from the perspective of mind and ego and personality, there isn't even a true movement of time and space the way you think of it when the whole things get stitched together and edited together for you? Remember? Well, those frames that he was attempting to tell you about are the creations of that particular cluster. And those frames are still frames, as we have told you, and as others have also told you before. And they can be exited. It is indeed possible, of course, to easily use any of these cave states of your personality, any of them, and immediately transfer to the Sankara state, because each of the states that you can generate through the mind are always inverted geometries of the true Sankara state. Whether you feel something within yourself, grief, sadness, these are ultimately expressions of love. So reach for love. You see pain and disease and unwellness around you. Again, use love, use joy, use well-being, use gratitude to reach into the truth. For many of you, we are being told here that for many of you, this is still a piece that has yet to appear in your study, but many years ago, to those that are sitting here today, the Palao Tse-san, we are sorry, has told you about pan-causal thinking. And the cluster of the mind that he described at that time is what we have described now. And leaving this cluster and moving into the state of Sankara is really as easy as just choosing it into being. By not choosing to translate these Savok-based concepts, but instead reaching for the Sankara ones at all times. Now, there is more to be said here about the nature of this 12-foldedness of yours and the 7-foldedness of ours and the 5-foldedness, for instance, of the Ra, Ekara. The deeper you express the folding nature of your Savok interaction, your identification with it, in other words, does not necessarily imply the depth you will plunge into Savok. But it does imply something else. When we, for instance, at our own 7-foldedness tell you that we went deeper than you did, you would think, well, this is probably because of rage or intensity of emotion, but it was not. It was weirdly because of the lack of it. You see, from our perspective, our 7-folded nature made it so that our ego, mind, personality complex had a much smaller structure for the personality component than you do. You, in other words, can venture into a more exclusive range and depth of emotion and condition, but because of that, you can also create the counter movement with the same type of strength and velocity. Even though emotion is not necessarily seen as a wonderful thing, it certainly is better than logic. If you take it even further back to the Ra expression, the 5-folded nature meant that for Ra and its society at the time, there was no personality whatsoever. Ra merely dealt with an ego-mind complex, no personality complex. For us, the personality part of the complex was a small, nearly meaningless component. But in both cultures, it led to the fact of a misinterpretation of unity and oneness that has near Holocaust hallucinogenic proportions, where life was simply being seen as universal, but in the wrong way, that it was exchangeable, that one life dimmed simply meant another life gained. But you, with your deeper sense of emotional ranges and states, can get indeed extremely angry to the point of stabbing somebody 20 times or launching a war or whatever it is. But it also leads to the counter movement and to the activation of the conditional states that you would consider positive. A type of conditional compassion may emerge for an enemy at the very last moment before you would kill it on the battlefield, for instance. For us, this was harder to achieve. And so we dove deeper. Ra dove even deeper. But we will leave it up to them to explain that at another time. So now that you understand a bit deeper the nature of this complex, and once again understand the movement of this exercise, of this way of being a bit better, we would like to take it back for a minute to the start of this conversation, where we spoke to you about the fabrication and the folding of worlds. Once you have abandoned the complexity as earlier described, which you can find in the head chakra, in favor of the unknowable, explorative nature of the belly chakra, you will see that your consciousness lines up with light, making the speed of light, the concept of speed itself, the concept of time, the concept of all of these physical and material and limited things meaningless, and it will open you up to the universal connection with all of us, as we have shared with you earlier in this transmission. Given that fact, it must be understood that when working with fabricating worlds, as we said earlier about the frames of Savok generating indeed the illusion of movement of time and space, but ultimately generating independent frames of very short-lasting moments each, that on the Savok level it merely copies the same Sankara technique, but from a limited perspective. It too generates merely one moment at a time, but where from the perspective of Sankara, this one moment at a time is all of time and space in which things rise and fall. From the perspective of Savok, the fabrication of a world is second by second or microsecond by microsecond, as explained by beloved Adamus recently. This is also why it is so easy to exit by simply choosing the states of Sankara each time. As it was explained recently by the Palau Tsesan to Dapadasanka over there, it truly is the difference, choosing Sankara over choosing that complexity that we have just described, the difference between expressing a song and moving or progressing from note to note in that song effortlessly, versus falling between two of the notes into a crevasse, which ultimately leads to a morass that you get stuck in, a pocket of time and space, if you will, where Savok and its complex nature identifies with you and you identify with it, and you are stuck there expressing an experience and experiencing an expression, but not progressing to the next note in the song, and the next, and the next, and the next. And yet, as we have told you now, using the same technique, it is very simple to step out of it. Where Savok needs to create moment after moment, as we just said, you in the state of Sankara are already creating but one. So merely attaching to the values and the virtues of these permanent states, rather than expressing the inverted geometries of the complexity of Savok that we have now described, is all that it requires now, since the return to Infinometry, for you to return to Infinometry, to that state. And you know it. Wanting to stay there, that is truly the problem at this time. And that is what you, as has been shared before, now have to work on. A little piece, perhaps, on this so-called fabrication and folding of worlds. When you begin to do this consciously, and you need to do this as well later for yourselves a little bit, you will, when you begin to do this breath of the immutable elements through the permutations of the permanent states, as we have described earlier, you will begin to notice at the start of that initial breath a rumble. The rumble that you will hear will be far, far away in the distance. Technically speaking, it is at the edge of the horizon, and we don't mean the horizon that you can see, the horizon of the universal horizon that we have described before. And it is not something that you hear only when you begin that breath. Technically speaking, if you truly, truly listen in the most silent of your moments, you can already hear it. If you sit still at some point after this transmission and you listen and you try to hear the furthest thing that you can possibly hear, and you choose to cut away and ignore everything else that you may hear in between, things in your house, things on the street, things on everywhere, whatever, until you can only hear the furthest thing that you can hear, then you will hear the beginning of this rumble. Now I know, beloved Barak, that we are going to be putting this on YouTube, so I hope that that is not a problem to call it a rumble. We don't want to fuck with the competition, huh? But that is what it is. It is what you will hear. And you can hear it right now. And as you begin the breath of the fabrication, of course, at the same time, you are also folding the frame that you are leaving. And that is when the rumble will begin to close in on you. The universal horizon, that is the furthest thing that your consciousness under the speed of light can possibly experience, will begin to close in on you. Like a tsunami of collapsing particles, it will approach you from an infinity or a near infinity away. It will come at you at indescribable speeds, which it already is doing, by the way, every second as Savok, as your mind is creating the next frame and destroying the previous frame. This is constantly happening. This is all all phased out so that you do not notice it is happening. But as you are becoming aware of it, as you choose to become aware of it, you can take charge of it, and you can leave the world of the frame, equalize your consciousness with the light you are expressing, and step into the world of the belly and the world of the heart. And that is where we will welcome you. Many of you in the last several days, as you have been on your walks and doing your daily things, have noticed strange objects observing you in the skies, orbs, and such. And this is merely an indication of the fact that you are doing what we are talking about right now. Equalizing this light speed with your consciousness and your consciousness with this light speed, so that we and many others can begin to make direct contact with you. It is also why your planet is observing all of these UAPs and UFOs and that sort of thing. Whether that is the right words for it or not, we don't care. But it is what is in this head. You are beginning to observe them because you are beginning to enter that space of the Ekara where everything else is. Not home base reality, but true Hono Leia reality. A true Ekara with all of its possibilities and explorative potential intact. That is where you are returning to. And as you are doing so, and this will be our topic for the next time we speak, you will begin to enter the state of the infinite neuron, the infinite particle, the infinite cell, where indeed everything will once again be connected for you to everything else. Reciprocal. But that is the topic for the next time we converse. And we will go deeply into that then. Before closing, we would like to make a statement that has perhaps not directly a lot to do with the things that we have discussed here today, yet it concerns your lives and your hearts greatly. And it is a statement about your canine companions, your feline companions, and all of those other animal companions, including plant kingdom and mineral kingdom, that accompanies you and brings you and offers you so much compassion and so much assistance and service on this journey. Because there is a reason why your interactions with them in the last few months, and in some cases even in some years already, has been so different, and why it is beginning to get even more so. And this, once again, has to do with your level of consciousness rising to this light quotient, and therefore releasing the state of Savok as you have known it, with the complexity with which you have known it. Because you see, yes, they are here, these canines and felines and other companions, as your guides to assist you in service and to be with you simply, but they too are evolving. And your evolution into infinometry is now giving them the ability to move their consciousness closer to yours than it has ever been, which will equal very shortly the level of interaction that you had with your canine, feline, excuse us, and other animal friends at the times of Lemuaya. Saying it even another way, they are now reaching the human stage of their consciousness that you are leaving, but they are reaching it with the foreknowledge and the fore-experience based on you and the service they had with you. So for them, they will not go through the complexities of the ego, mind, personality complex, and have instead decided to forego that step in their evolution and stay connected, entangled with the human consciousness personally and permanently and universally. This means that as you, as a human collective, will begin to evolve to the stages of a social memory complex, the way in which Ra exists, if you will, that their consciousness collectives will join that evolution directly and stay with you through the rest of this Ekara. Now this is something that has never happened before, and therefore we will not spend too many words on it now, as the beloved Ra will when their time to speak comes. At this stage, beloveds, we probably need to return this body to its current owner, the Pakuan Yin San, and to liberate all of you to go and release your bladders and other parts of the physical self where needed. We see that some of you have already collapsed here, as you have starved during the years it has taken for us to finish this communication. But we are grateful that you held on. We see that Barak's fingers are still functional at this time, and we like to keep it that way. So therefore, all we can say, with all the love in our hearts, is adieu, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, but more importantly, see you soon. Keep an eye out in the skies. The coming time will be a fascinating one. Gratitude for being the central component of this transmission. It is our greatest hope that it and the time woven here together may be of service to the whole, to you as the whole, and to the whole as you. It is meaningless to express our love for you, for it is a permanent condition which we would never want to get rid of. And the same for the joy and freedom we feel as we sit here with you and watching you rise into this next stage of your evolution. It is indeed, as the Pakuan Yin San would say, showing a great level of awesomeness. It is indeed. Ohami to all, and see you next time, if you don't see us first.